Like, what are you doing every day to build trust with yourself so that you can share from that place?
Well, welcome everybody. It's great to have you here today. I'm Eric Lyleson from Essential Wholeness Psychology, and I'm going to be interviewing Rainee Blake. She's singer, songwriter, musician. Today, I really want to talk to her about the training she does with people, the teaching in voice and singing, and helping to bring out your natural full potential as a singer and as a speaker or as a communicator. I'm interested to find out more about what Rainee has to offer, because also I think it might be something of interest to my clients and people I work with who really want to find their voice and maybe tap into their creativity. So welcome, Rainee. It's great to have you here this morning.
Thanks, Eric, aka my father. Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah, well, it's very exciting for me to know that in some ways you're kind of walking a little bit in my footsteps, that you're working with people, that you're helping them with their healing and kind of tapping into their true self and finding their true voice. Can you tell us real basically what you feel like you have to offer people?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. I was just talking to a friend of mine today about the work and how aligned it is with therapy sometimes, and the sort of vulnerability that comes with using your voice, whether you're singing or speaking, how closely connected that is to your emotional experience, to how you feel about yourself and your identity. And sometimes, a lot of the time, people have a real disconnect between the sort of sense of worthiness and sense of self that they have inside and the way that they project that into the world. So a lot of the work that I've been doing for the last few years is about helping people to join those two aspects, to cultivate a sense of safety and presence within themselves, within what they have to offer, and finding a way to fluidly and freely express that in the world. So a lot of the work it's a combination of technique, meditation, body work, and breath work. And it depends on the session that I'm doing with somebody. It's always different on the individual client and where they're at. And something that is really important in the sessions is to get really clear on the direction somebody wants to go. It's really important to me to see where the client is at right at the beginning of the session. I always like to spend half of the first session when we get together talking about, how do you feel about your voice? What's your relationship with your voice? Who listened to you as a child? That's a question that I love to bring up to people, because as you know, Dad, most of the way that we learn to be in the world is based around how we learn to be in the world as a child. And so understanding that and kind of unpacking that helps people to realize the ways, the kinds of the relationships and environments in which they aren't speaking in their full presence, in which they're either hiding like this. Patsy Rodenberg talks about this. Are you hiding like this in an introverted way? Or are you hiding like this, which is also a form of hiding, right? Which is sort of the overly confident kind of fake it till you make it energy. And so a lot of the work that we do is finding that middle ground in between those two spaces, where you can be totally in your presence, in your authenticity and worth, without feeling the need to retreat or project yourself onto the world.
I guess one of the questions that rises in my mind is, and talking to a lot of people myself, is that it might be hard sometimes to find the person who listened to me and really listened to me and heard me when I was a child. that could bring up some quite vulnerable feelings for people, I imagine.
It can be super vulnerable, yes.
Yeah. And what have you found really helps people to feel safe, to learn to let themselves feel listened to and heard, rather than pulled back or pushed forward?
The thing that's interesting about that question in particular is oftentimes people can't find somebody who really will listen to them, or they're listened to at school or in academic situations, and so they connect their feeling of their ability to be heard with achievement or with things outside of themselves, rather than just your inherent worthiness as a human being, your essential wholeness, if you will. So what a lot of what we would do, if that is something that came up for somebody that they didn't feel listened to at all, is through a lot of presencing work. So that's work I do in the beginning of the lesson, which is breath and body awareness, focused attention, give and take, which is, I'll just give you an example of this exercise. After you've done your warm-up, your presencing, you come into your body, you come into your breath, you come into the space, and then with a fixed point of focus. So we'll work with something really simple first, which is your hand. And so you breathe to your hand, and it's just your hand, right? This is really safe, really comfortable. And you focus on breathing in a way that is connecting you to this second circle idea. That's what I was talking about before, which is that space in between. And that's the work of Patsy Rodenberg, who is someone that I've studied a lot, read a lot of her books. I think it's really interesting, the work she does. And so it's this idea that you're able to give and receive in equal measure. And you just start with the breath, and you just start with the hand. So it's like creating these simple, enclosed, safe spaces for people to feel like they're able to both give and receive, right? Because listening can also be challenging, right? So I create this just like really safe little container, and then our next point of focus might be an object in the room, and then maybe outside. So we're starting to like push the boundaries of what's going to start to feel comfortable. But like, I think my number one thing is that do people feel safe? So I like to keep it really, really simple. That's one exercise I do. And sometimes we work with visualization in meditation as well, with particular people in their life. That's something that might happen in week 3 or 4.
Well, that's fantastic. I really like that. So you're really meeting people where they're at and where they can find safety, and where they can kind of relax that need to pull back or push out, and they can just be with their hand or whatever it might be. And then that might extend outward. I guess also part of the being listened to, I imagine, would be they would really feel like you're listening to them and you're, being present for them in a non-judgmental way. And that probably in itself, over time helps them to feel safe and to open up. Would that be right?
I hope so. Yeah. I try to listen with as much in second circle as much as I can, right? Which is with an open heart, without judgment. And my intention, whenever I work with somebody, is to support them and hold up the mirror for them and create a safe space for them to grow. So that every time before a lesson, I always ground into that, right? It's, as I'm sure to be of service, as much as you can without the ego getting involved.
Yeah.
Right? So what's one of the ways that you ground in before you do a session when you're
well, every morning pretty much I'm sitting in meditation for 20 minutes to half an hour, and really bringing presence to my physical, emotional, and spiritual bodies. So the more I am showing up, the easier I think it is for others to show up. The research literature is really kind of backing this up, because in a way, when you talk about really being heard, we're talking about in childhood attachment, healthy attachment, and a secure attachment. If people have a secure attachment, then they're not either pushing forward or pulling back, but they can just be, present and feel free to be themselves. Mm-hmm. And what's really interesting is that, going along exactly with what you're saying, is that non-judgmental awareness or mindfulness, right, is basically what we can cultivate with ourselves, which is the same as what healthy parenting is. So mothers or fathers who really bond with their children and have a healthy attachment are able to really be in the moment and present and connect and really hear and feel and see their child. And the child feels seen and heard and felt. And that kind of whole being, that kind of being witnessed or received, that allows, children and then grow up to adults to feel free, safe and free to be themselves.
Totally agree.
Sounds like you're following the research.
Well, a lot of the work, as you can tell based on my question, is inner child work. And it all comes back to, how do we care for ourselves? How do we be the parent for ourselves? And I like to really support my clients to think about it in that way. And particularly with the voice, because like I was saying, it's a really vulnerable space. People get really, people can be really blocked in general in their throat chakra. It's really, really common. And so to take you've got to take baby steps, little baby steps to feel safe, to express yourself in that way.
I'm assuming, and I kind of know, that you've had a lot of teachers and helpers along the way that have helped you to develop your own style, help you to find your own voice, and also how to kind of, make the most of it. I mean, you're a professional singer and actor these days. So can you tell us a little bit about, the people who have really inspired you and helped you and guided you, and that you maybe even draw upon, in what you do now? Who's been most important in your development?
Well, definitely Justine Bradley would be my number one. As you know, I worked with her for 8 years, consistently, almost every week, doing singing lessons with her from the age of 12 to 18. So that's 6 years. Anyway, math is not my strong suit. But Justine is fantastic, and I learned so much from her. I think the number one thing that I learned from her was breath, because every time at the beginning of our singing lessons, she would make me get on the floor and do my belly breaths. And I always do that with my students now. Some of her exercises, breath and singing exercises, I use to this day when I'm teaching people. And I think that was the main thing, is focusing on making sure you have a good foundation of breath support and control when you're not just singing, but it applies to your speaking as well. So breathing low into the belly and supporting that. I mentioned Patsy Rodenberg, who I've never worked with personally, but I love her books and I've watched all of her videos and stuff. And I think what she has to teach is fantastic. Oh my gosh, so many. Judy Bailey, who I worked with at the con, I use a lot of her exercises still. Kristen Barati, I use a lot of her work. My mum, you. I mean, I've learned a lot from both of you. I feel, even watching you hold space for people in family constellations, I learned a lot. And coming to your meditation classes, I think I was coming to that when I was maybe like 21, 22. I was coming to your classes. And there's such a amazing thing that you do, Dad, which is you can be so in your sort of masculine and power and mastery, and at the same time be cracked open in this beautiful, soft way. And like I can see your heart just like emanating through your mastery, which is like it's a fine thing to find a balance between. And I think that's probably something that I really learned from you, is to, yes, own my wisdom and be strong in that, but still let my little girl, shine and be seen as well. So
do people get that, do you think that most of the people, the students you have, do they get that and feel the wonderment or value of that?
I think so. I hope so. And kind of like what you were saying, I hope to model that as much as I can, because a great teacher is going to be doing the work with the student. This is a journey for me too. I'm learning the very things that I teach, in tandem with my students. So I think sometimes that kind of humility, like you're standing along beside somebody, I try to access that as much as I can, because that helps them to see that within themselves, that okay, where I'm at is okay, and I'm allowed to learn.
Yeah.
And I'm allowed to be growing.
I'm still kind of in touch with Kristen Berardi a bit, and mostly on social media. And she's such an amazing example of what you're talking about. And I think this is something that, of course, as a professional singer and actor, is so important. And watching her, she's so vulnerable, so her, and yet so masterful, like one of the most masterful jazz singers on the planet. And yet she has this sort of innocent, childlike quality that and unguardedness that shines through all the time. How does knowing what you know affect you as a performer, or make a difference in when you're performing?
Well, I think really a lot of the time that sort of presence state that we're kind of talking about happens in these moments when you're performing, or hopefully that's the goal. Like when, like you're talking about variety, when you've seen somebody who's really amazing, and they're on stage, that is like they're totally in their presence, they're totally in their worth, and they're shining bright, right? You see it with athletes when they're like about to get on the field or whatever. So I think it totally applies to performance. I think those are the moments when it comes alive the most. And for me, I think it's always been a dance for me between like loving and accepting where I am and what I have to share in this moment, and wanting to get better and do better. So I think that kind of balancing act is sort of interesting in what you were talking about, because there's no place for the critic when you're on stage. There's no place for the editor. There's no place for the self-development guru or whatever. So as much as I can when I'm performing, I try to set that part of me aside so that I can be fully present in sharing where I am right now in this moment. Because it's really easy to get caught up in, because I've struggled with perfectionism, get stuck on that wasn't good enough, or that could have been better, or what do they think of me, or I have to prove that I know what I'm doing. That's one that shows up for me a lot. And instead to drop into an intention that's centered around my heart, and it's centered around the sort of depth and generosity of what I have to give, you know. So I try as much as I can to work with intention that grounds me in my innate sense of wholeness and in the present moment, sort of those two things. And I find that is a pathway to my full presence. It gets me out of my like unconscious intention that's playing, which is saying prove, do, you know, whatever it's saying. And that really helps me. So I try to do that when I'm performing, when I'm auditioning, as much as I can.
Right. So it's really sort of just letting yourself love what you do and do it in a way that feels loving to you, and hopefully in a way kind of reaches out to whoever you're singing or speaking to, that you're communicating from this place of openness and acceptance and kind of desire to bring something of value in a way without having to prove yourself, but kind of maybe this really deep value, which is like unconditional love and acceptance.
Yes, exactly. It's the innate value. And that comes so much back to how do you feel about yourself? Do you feel worthwhile innately? Do you feel essentially whole within yourself, right? And so much of that is the work that you do beforehand, like in your morning meditation, right? Like, what are you doing every day to build trust with yourself so that you can share from that place?
Yeah, and it that gift, I think, that people receive when others are so honest in their self-expression, is experienced all the time. I don't think we necessarily take time to notice it, but like you go to a film and you see a really vulnerable someone acting in a very vulnerable, honest way, and some of that gets inside of you. You know, you leave the theater feeling more open and more in tune with that sort of presencing within yourself. Or I think, you know, it happens with listening to your favorite musician or singer, and they're singing their truth and from their heart, and it opens your heart just listening. It kind of gets inside and moves you in some way, and you maybe even pass that on in your conversations, or, you know, just the way you make eye contact, or, you know, the way you dance or walk down the street or something. It can permeate out. Yeah.
So when art is good, it should do that.
Yeah.
That's the point of art.
Yeah. So your own healing, your own opening, your own trusting yourself kind of tends to translate out to be a benefit of others, because it kind of gives them permission to be that way too.
Your whole body is your instrument when you sing or when you speak, right? So engaging the whole body also helps you engage with your presence, right? Because it's like your wholeness. Again, we're coming back to wholeness, because if you're only just expressing this little part of myself, the rest of my body is like in this posture, right? It's not going to be fluid. It's not going to be free and feel authentic. So a lot of what we do is just really simple. Like, okay, now bring awareness to your feet, and we'll start to move the feet around in a really, really slow and present way. And then we'll move up sort of through the body, doing that in different ways. Oftentimes then it'll be a body scan in stillness, always standing, because standing or sitting is how we engage in the world, right? We don't, usually standing. So that's a big focus of the mindfulness work that I do, is actually getting you upright and getting you used to being mindful and aware, in the posture that you're most normally in relationship and things. So standing up, a lot of what we do as well is exploring these different postures and different kinds of tension that might come up for you in your day to day. So say you have a lot of tension in your jaw, we'll like overdo that. We'll like create more tension to kind of embody the tension even more, and then work to release. And you start to, it brings more awareness to, oh my God, I hold my jaw so much. Like I hold so much tension there. So and then we'll do that with posture as well. So maybe we'll explore these different circles of energy. So we'll explore the first circle energy, we'll explore this posture. How does it feel? We'll start to notice what sensations are coming up in your body. Can you breathe? How are you breathing in this posture? Does it feel safe? Does it feel secure to be there? And we'll just like hang out there.
Yeah.
And then we'll
so in a way, you're helping people accept that part of them, be with that part of them, rather than kind of trying to get rid of that part. It's like joining with that part.
Yes, exactly.
So that part feels safe to, and heard and felt and seen.
It's not, the point is not to fix. In fact, there's nothing to fix. The point is only to hold space for what is there and to make it feel, to invite it in. There's my inner child in a corner, in a dark room. Let me open the door and bring the light in.
And would people ever find a song that might, give voice to that part, sing that part song,
Totally. Actually, and I do this a lot of the technical singing warm-ups will be kind of an extension of that, exploring different aspects of self. So we have this kind of like this sort of whiny, nasally little girl brat character that will bring that character in our warm-up, and then maybe we'll bring in this sort of more masculine, woofy kind of sound. So we're exploring, I'm trying to help them to explore ugly sounds as well as what they perceive as to be pretty sounds in their as well. And actually with a student the other day, I was like, we need to have fun. So we did a Bruno Mars song. Who's this like pop singer? And I got her up dancing, singing the song, fully embodied, right? So that I think was really helpful, just to bring the joy back into the process of learning, so that there's a balance between the technical work and the emotional freedom work. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're really trying to help people have fun in this process, that kind of experience the joy of discovering their body and their voice and their playfulness and this whole thing. Definitely. So nice.
All bring everyone to the party.
Kind of reminds me that from a young age you were very good with younger children, and always, kind of playing, if we go to visit other friends, and then later as a babysitter, you were very good at you kind of bringing shy kids out of their shell and playing with them. And it seems like you're kind of still doing that.
I am kind of still doing that.
Like the heaven sent babysitter, that's every kid's sort of dream come true. And
I just do work with some actual kids as well, and I love it. It's such good work. I mean, sometimes people come to me and they want more coaching around like being a performer and being an artist, and so I often work with people on creating like healthy rituals and self-care practices around being an artist, because it's fucking hard. It's hard work. Yeah, I think creating healthy rituals and a good relationship with yourself and your growth mindset. So there's something we kind of talked about is holding space for us where we are, and looking forward as well, and finding a balance between that. So I work with people a lot on creating positive reinforcing like affirmations and things like that. as well as structural tools of how to move into being an artist, putting yourself out there, things like that. Songwriting. I work with people on songwriting as well. Yeah, all kinds of things. I love my people because I get to just help them in so many different ways. It's just so fulfilling. Yeah, so usually what I'll do is we'll set up an introductory lesson, which will just be the first session for an hour. And I usually have like a reduced rate for that, just so people can have like no commitment, just see what it's about. And then if you want to continue with lessons after that, I usually recommend that people book at least 4 lessons in a chunk, just so you can start to see what, where the work is going and how to progress. And yeah, you can send me an email.
Hope we can, talk again one of these days and find out more.
Thanks, Dad. This was so fun. I really enjoyed it. And I hope everyone enjoyed our conversation as much as me.
Yeah, it's been great. All right.